All right. The name is Dale. I'm going to do something very different today. I'm not going to review an album. I'm doing my top 10 best rappers of all time. This is my personal top 10 best rappers of all time. I felt since everyone seems to be doing their top 50, top 20, I was going to do my top 10. And this is not based on what everybody else tends to go with, not the majority of what most folks tend to say when they have these conversations or debates or throw up their list. This is my personal list. So with that being said, my criteria for picking my top 10 personal best rappers of all time, you got to be able to rap at a superior level first and foremost. Lyrics matter. Lyrics are important. Your range of subject is important. How creative you are lyrically and with your song writing is very important to me. But another part of this criteria that is very important to me is your catalog. I'm very big on catalog. I'm very big on longevity of catalog. If you got a classic in there, how many good to very good to great to classic albums you've made in your career, how deep is your catalog, so on and so forth. I'm very big on albums. So those are the first two most important things with me when I'm picking my personal top 10. As far as like popularity and record sales, all that shit is like down at the bottom of me. It counts, it matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I'm not saying how many hits you got, how many radio hits, how many club hits, and how many pop hits, or how many units you sold, if you went platinum, double platinum, all that shit, diamond. I'm not saying that doesn't matter, but it's low on my list. That shit doesn't compare to if the album is good or not. That's what matters to me in the end. Is your catalog good and are your albums good? And how many of them are considered good or great? So with that being said, now my top 10 is not really in the order that I'm going to say it in. I didn't really take the time to break down who's in what order. Number one is probably number one. Number one is going to be my favorite rapper of all time, that I think is the best rapper of all time at this point in their career. It could change. Someone could pass them. Okay, number 10 is Kendrick Lamar. Now, if his new album is just as good as his previous 3 albums, if he can do that, and that's a high bar, and he's been on a long break, a long hiatus, been like 5 years since he dropped Damn. So if he's able to do that, he could possibly move into my top 5, maybe top 3 of all time. Like I said, I'm big on catalog, I'm big on albums. That would be pretty much 4 classics in a row, or damn near classics or classics in a row. 4 of them. That's very hard to do. Not many artists say they did that or have done that. My number 9 is Scarface. What needs to be said, he probably would be higher. He probably would go like in my top 5, maybe, if I really sat down and thought about it. But for now, I'm gonna give him 9. I was just going off top of my head. So Scarface is number 9. He has the group joints with Ghetto Boys. His solo albums are undeniable. I know people tend to go with The Diary as his best album, and I can understand why. It is a very, very good album. It's considered a classic by many, but I think my favorite album by Scarface is The Fix. So I really love The Diary, but I think if I had to pick between those two, it would be The Fix for me. The Fix, to me, is his best album. I love that album. I think that's a classic as well. So then you got number 8, Common. Now, I know a lot of people give Common a lot of shit because what he's done lately. And I do believe in the philosophy and theory that you got to update your resume. You can't just live off the past. You can't live off your laurels. You can't be content of the good shit you did way back then. But at the same time, you can't take away what the man has done in the past. So even though he hasn't made a good album, in my opinion, since Finding Forever, which was like in the 2000s, and I know his last, maybe 5 albums have been just okay. He does have classic. He has Resurrection. He has One Day It'll All Make Sense. He has Water for Chocolate. He has B. And Finding Forever is not a classic by nobody's standards, but is a good album. That's probably the last good album he did. So he potentially has 4 out of 5 albums that were considered borderline classics, if not classics. To me, like Resurrection is a classic in my mind, and One Day It'll All Make Sense is damn near close to being a classic. And if someone was to say it was a classic, I wouldn't even debate them. And B is considered a classic. Water for Chocolate is considered like a cult classic. People tend to love that album a lot. So you can't take that away from Common. And he is very lyrical. He's high level lyricism. He got storytelling. He got the battle raps. He got the conscious shit. He got the social commentary. He got the introspective shit. He can go in many directions. He got the good girl joints. He got some of the classic female joints, like The Light and shit like that. So you can't take that away from Common. Then you got Raekwon at number 7. He made Built for Cuban Links, which is a classic. Love that album. I played that cassette. I bought the cassette back in the day. Played that shit to death in my ride. And I love the part 2 to Built for Cuban Links. I love that joint. That was a borderline classic to me. And I love his album that's very underrated and no one tends to talk about is Wu-Tang versus Shaolin. I think it was the album after Built for Cuban Links Part 2. I love that album. That album has a lot of replay value. It doesn't get the credit it deserves. Like Raekwon's last few albums been pretty good. The joint, The Wild, I think that was his last joint. That was a very solid joint. Very, very solid joint. But it was one that was kind of iffy. I think before The Wild, can't think of the name of the album. It was iffy, but Raekwon, he got like 2 or 3 iffy albums. I know Immobilarity was iffy too. So he do got some questionable joints, but he got some bangers as far as the solo joint. And then he got the Wu-Tang joints. I mean, you got the first Wu-Tang album. He's a big part of that, so you got to give him credit for that. And Wu-Tang Forever, the double joint, I don't really consider that a classic, but it's a good album. Good double album. So number 6 is Ghostface Killah. Ghostface Killah was one of my favorite rappers at one point. Like at one point you couldn't tell me nothing wrong about Ghostface. Like anything he put out I was gonna get automatically. It didn't matter. I ain't had to hear shit from it. Ghostface was my guy for a minute. And he's in my top 6. I think Supreme Clientele is one of the best hip hop albums ever made. Ever. Like I put that up against most hip hop albums, if not all hip hop albums. I love that album. Then he got the Iron Man joint. Some people debate is Iron Man better than Supreme Clientele. I think Supreme Clientele is much better than Iron Man. Iron Man's good, it's real good, but I just love Supreme Clientele. I think that's his peak right there. That's when he's at his best. And he has Fish Scale, which was a very good album. I even like More Fish. The joint after that was pretty good. He got the Wu-Tang albums. He can throw in his catalog and put under his in his toolbox of shit he's done. And he's all over Raekwon's albums, especially the Built for Cuban Link joint. So his catalog is deep when you add all that shit together. Number 5 is Ice Cube. Ice Cube was another one of those rappers. At one point, you couldn't tell me nothing wrong about Ice Cube. I just thought he was the pinnacle of rappers. Like, he was killing it for a minute. His first 2 solo albums, America Most Wanted and Death Certificate, are just bona fide classics. Death Certificate is one of my favorite albums, period. No matter what kind of music it is, no matter what genre of music, what form of music, what type of music, Death Certificate is the type of album that I strive to make when I'm working with an artist. I'm a producer. When I'm working with an artist and we gonna do a whole album together, that's the album I'm shooting for. That's the type of quality album I'm shooting to make. I think that album is one of the greatest albums ever made. And how he did it back then, you know, this is before MP3s and streaming and all that shit. You basically had cassettes and vinyl. I don't even think CDs was a thing when Death Certificate dropped, or it just started. It just got its birth where people started kind of buying CDs. But when he did the Death side and the Life side, I thought that was genius. I think that album is one of the best made albums ever. And he has the Straight Outta Compton album with NWA when he was with NWA. And being that he wrote basically all the Eazy-E shit and probably some of Dre shit on that joint, gotta give him a lot of credit for that. And on Eazy-E solo album, Easy Does It, I believe he wrote all that shit for Eazy. So you gotta give him his credit. I know his albums after the Predator album wasn't too great, wasn't too good. I like Lethal Injection. Lethal Injection was solid. It was solid. But probably after that album, Ice Cube kind of start to, you know, fall off a little bit. And he went into movies and shit like that. So, but like I said, you can't take away what the guy has done, even though he hasn't really made any new music to speak of in the last, 20 years, within the last 20 years, but you can't take away what the guy did in the past. So he's number 5 for me. Number 4 is Rakim, the God, the lyrical God. Big impact, big influence on a lot of rappers. He has a classic Paid in Full. Some folks believe that Follow the Leader is his best album. I still think Paid in Full is a better album than Follow the Leader. This is when he was with Eric B. So they was Eric B and Rakim. So his first, 4 albums was Eric B and Rakim. I think Paid in Full is a classic. A lot of people think Follow the Leader is a classic. Then you got, I forgot the name of the album after that, or Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em, which was a good album. And then I can't think of the one after that. Don't Sweat the Technique. That's the name of that album after that. Then he went solo. His solo albums, his first solo album was pretty good. But after that, you know, not so much. But you can't take away what the guy has done in the past and the big influence he's had on a lot of rappers and the culture in itself. So I'm gonna go number 3. I'm gonna go KRS-One. At one point, I thought he was the best. Couldn't tell me no wrong about KRS-One. Still making albums to this day. Just dropped a new one not too long ago, which wasn't that bad to me. It's some folks that wasn't digging it, but I thought it wasn't bad. I thought it was better than I thought it was gonna be. To be honest with you, I thought I wasn't gonna like it at all, and it had some good joints on there. But KRS-One, when he's with Boogie Down Production, got Criminal Minded, classic. By All Means Necessary, classic. Return to the Boom Bap, his first solo album. People consider that a classic. I don't. I like it, but I don't consider it a classic. But some people do. And then you got I Got Next, which I think is a very good album. That's probably the last good album that KRS-One made. All the albums after that were just okay, you know, or not good at all, basically. But you can't take away from what he did in the past. He's on my Mount Rushmore. So is Rakim. He's on my Mount Rushmore. So it's gonna be hard to get them off there. but there's some folks that got potential to do it. Now, my number 2 artist, rapper of all time, is Jay-Z. I mean, what is it to be said about Jay-Z? I don't really have to go into explanation why he's number 2. And my number 1 is Nas. Nas, to me, is the GOAT at this time. He is the Tom Brady of rap at this time. I had Jay-Z at number 1 for a very long time, even though I was always partial to Nas as an MC. I always thought if you put my feet to the fire and say who's the best between Jay-Z and Nas, I always went with Jay-Z in the past because I thought Jay-Z had the better overall catalog. Even though I more so favored Nas as a rapper over Jay-Z, I always had to go with Jay-Z because of the overall picture, the overall catalog compared to the two. But I put Nas at number 1 now based on those last 3 albums, King Disease 1, King Disease 2, and Magic. He passed Jay-Z because the last album Jay-Z put out was what? 444? How was that, like 4 or 5 years ago maybe? And some people think it's a classic. I don't think that album's a classic. I think it's a good album, but I don't think it's a classic. I don't even think it's borderline classic. I think it's a good album. But I don't think Jay-Z's last album is nearly as good as King Disease 2 and Magic. So I got Nas passing him because Nas has put 3 quality albums out recently that just, to me, beats 444. Well, maybe King Disease 1 not so much, but I like King Disease 2. I mean, King Disease 1 is solid, but King Disease 2 and Magic are very strong. So I think with him releasing those joints out recently, I think he's passed Jay-Z, in my opinion. I think Nas is the GOAT at this point. But we will see. We will see who will come take that crown from Nas, in my opinion. Will Jay-Z be able to drop another album? Will he drop another album that would take that crown again? I don't know. As you notice, Biggie and Tupac are not in my top 10. No, they're not. It wasn't a mistake. I didn't forget them. I have respect for them. I'm a fan of those 2 guys. I have their music. I bought their music back in the day. I'm in my 40s, so I do know I was in the midst of all that when they was still alive. So I know what I'm talking about. It's not like I'm a youngin' and I didn't know, I didn't experience, or whatever the case may be. They're not in my top 10. Biggie, due to the fact his untimely death, I know a lot of people say, well, if he had lived and he had never got killed, he would be doing this, that, and the third, and he would have done this, and he would be this big. I can't go by that. I can't go by ifs. His 2 albums, even though one is a double, so you can, if you want to say 3 albums, I don't think, in my mind, that's not a strong enough case to pass all these 10 people that I named before him. Like Biggie would probably be in my top 20, and Tupac. I like Tupac. I like him a lot. I bought his first album when little to no people really knew about him, when Brenda was having a baby and all that good shit. I bought it on cassette. I actually don't think All Eyes on Me, his double album, is a classic. I never thought it was a classic. I never understood how people thought it was a classic because I skipped a lot of shit on that joint. I think his album Me Against the World and his album, the 7 Day Theory, Illuminati, I think those 2 albums are better than All Eyes on Me. But Tupac will probably be in my top 20 because I do like Tupac. I don't think he has a classic album, in my opinion. I know I'm getting a lot of shit for that. I think a lot of people go at me and say I should get my hip hop card taken away, and my list has lost credibility without putting Tupac or Biggie in there, and also for me saying Tupac has never made a classic album. I think he has a lot of classic songs, but I don't think overall he's ever made a classic album, in my opinion. But with that being said, that's my top 10. I'm sticking to it. And I gotta do a shameless plug. Me and my folks Charles, we have an album together. That's Charles and the Ugly Professor. I am the Ugly Professor. He's the rapper. I am the producer. The name of the album is called Force Multipliers. It's on all streaming music platforms. It's cool, crazy, ugly face music. Great production, great rhyming. It's different. It's hip hop. Get it. There you have it. I'm done. I'm finished.